Here we go, Gryff David.
Cool. Hey, everyone. So, what am I here to talk about? Your prototype is ugly. Cool, thanks, everyone. No, your prototype is ugly, and we're going to talk about why it matters and how to fix it. I mean, it's hideous, so. And you may be thinking, like, who even cares? And we're going to talk about why it actually matters. So, who am I? My name is Gryff David. Been making games for a long time. Here's a picture of me when I was 7 making a Pokemon game with my cat. I'm a designer and programmer. Worked on some cool stuff you may have played. Memoir of Neon White. I'm very, very good at making cool stuff quickly. And cool, why does it matter? Being ugly may be holding it back, and you may have heard if it's not fun in gray box, it won't be fun finished, and that's actually not universally true. I don't want to play it. Nobody else does either. People tend to think that nice-looking things work better. And this is a really important thing, is other game devs are not your audience. Game devs have the ability to look at what you've made and sort of fill in the gaps and go, oh, cool, okay, I see what you're doing here. I understand why this matters. And players don't have that, and players are actually your audience, and that's a really important distinction. Games are partially about vibes, and your prototype has no vibe. Your capsule prototype is not functionally identical to what you actually want to build. I don't even want to play my capsule prototype, so why would I want to play yours? And so you need to figure out where that intersection of your gameplay and the aesthetics and where that actually becomes important. So we're going to look at an example quickly. This is a gray box and capsule prototype for a stealth game that I threw together in 5 days. It has the being able to sneak around, slow yourself down, break windows. You can pick up a bottle and throw it to lure some guards and that sort of thing. But what it looked like before I changed it to look like a capsule prototype is it looked like this. And this, again, we threw this together in 5 days, and this is a far better example of serving gameplay, right? Like, the aesthetic is, what you're selling to the player is the feeling of sneaking around a building, being vulnerable, breaking lights, feeling like you are in this vulnerable state where you want to not be caught by someone. And it's really important that you chase the intersection of your functionality and the aesthetics that are going to serve that functionality as well. This is another. When I was working at 24-bit Games, every October we would have a 30-day-long game jam, and it turns out you can throw some really cool stuff together in 30 days. And if you put a little bit of extra effort in to be able to make something as beautiful and functional, then it turns out that if you're making a horror game, adding in the visuals, making somebody feel like they're sneaking around this creepy room being chased by cultists, that actually serves your gameplay. It serves giving the player the feeling that you're looking to evoke, right? This, again, is another prototype that we put together with a few friends in 30 days for our game jam. And this is actually not a good game, and we'll talk why later. It looks great, but it actually doesn't serve the gameplay. And this, again, is another prototype that we put together in 30 days for a game jam. It's, we have like cutscenes and everything in there, but we can talk about why that actually matters. So your prototype doesn't have to be ugly. It is possible to make them nice very quickly. It's worth spending a bit of extra time. And there's a UX concept where the people are far more likely to forgive small mistakes if it's functionally beautiful. It's essentially like pretty privilege, but for games. And you kind of want to be using that to your advantage. And some jank is fine, actually, especially for prototype. Like if you're worrying about if like a weapon is slipping through a hand or something like that, you need to stop. Okay, cool. So how? First one is going to seem super obvious to a lot of you, and it may be, but learn your tools. You actually need to be creating something to be able to learn them. But if you're constantly looking up how to retarget animations or how to create sound effect cues or something like that, then you're wasting time. So learn your tools. And you learn by doing, and you reinforce your learning by repeatedly doing those things. You should be essentially like practicing using your game engine to its full potential. You shouldn't just be tinkering. You should actually be trying to, build a game, not just tinkering around with a little project on the side. So another way to do that is to use other people's stuff. Do not steal. People give it away already. You should become a hoarder. There are so many assets available online, sound effects, animations, 3D models, that sort of thing, that are available for a brief window of time and then get taken offline. So if you see something great that you want to use, hoard it away somewhere on a giant hard drive. You shouldn't be stop wasting your time like making your own assets if what you actually want to do is make a game, right? Like most of us want to actually create a game and not create assets. You can't be too fussy about what people give you online though. Stop trying to solve problems. An example of this is, for instance, dialogue trees, right? Like if you need a dialogue system in your game, you shouldn't be trying to solve that. It's already been solved. There is Ink, which is available both for Unity and Unreal, and there's the not yet dialogue system for Unreal. Both of those are solved problems already. You don't need to go and waste time building this entire dialogue system so you can use it in your game. You actually want to make a game, not assets. And you can often fix what doesn't work perfectly. If you find a model online that isn't quite what you're looking for, you can fix it. So let's look at an example of that. We have this free model that someone gave away on like Sketchfab, right? Throw it into Blender, and that brings me to my third point, which is learn some Blender. Blender is possibly possibly the best piece of free software ever. The fact that Blender is free means that we actually aren't living in the worst timeline. Knowing the basics of Blender will empower you to do more than just make models. It'll empower you to fix them and alter them towards your goals. And I will, at the end, have a bunch of useful links for learning Blender. You don't need to be a master, right? Just enough to get by. If you can add loop cuts, shifting around some UVs, scaling, rotating, using materials, that sort of thing, just the basics, that's going to give you a lot of really useful skills to be able to wield it to suit your end goals. And I will at the end have a bunch of links. This entire presentation, by the way, will be available for you to go through and see my speaker's notes and everything at the end. So here's an example, right? Is in Blender, we took that same model from before, take a screenshot of John David Washington from Tenet, and this took 9 minutes to take that model from what wasn't serving what I needed, and to just do some shifting around of UVs, changing the model a little bit, and you end up with something that actually serves what I'm looking to create, right? We end up with John David Washington. There we go. And that brings me on to another point, which is use Mixamo for rigging. If you haven't used Mixamo before, it's honestly kind of an incredible piece of online software that is completely free. If you aren't using it, you're wasting time. The Mixamo skeleton is compatible with a lot of stuff, and I'll show you an example just now, but if you drop the Mixamo skeleton into Unreal or Unity, it knows what that bone hierarchy looks like. It can retarget animations automatically from the Mixamo skeleton to the Unreal skeleton. It's literally 2 buttons in Unreal. It can auto-generate animation retargeting. Mixamo has hundreds of animations that are ready to use, right? It has combat and locomotion and dialogue, etc., and you should be using those. So let's look at an example of how Mixamo's automatic rigging works. This is the entire process in real time, by the way. You drop that same model that I made before of John David Washington, and you just drop it into Mixamo here, and it lets you then place a series of markers onto this model that this mesh doesn't have a skeleton in, right? You place a few markers, and then you hit next, and it does some magic behind the scenes, and then you end up with a fully functional rigged humanoid animation that's ready. Well, the skeleton's ready for you to use, and you could just drop that into Unreal and start using it with other animations. But you could also just use the like dancing John David Washington animation straight from Mixamo. Again, like links at the end. So use animation retargeting. Allows you to copy animations from one mesh to another. So if you have a bunch of, if you've hoarded a bunch of Unreal animations, and those are all great, but you're like, okay, well, how do I get them onto my model that I made, is to use the animation retargeting. It works for all kinds of meshes. It works for humanoids and first-person arms as well, and creatures. Like you can retarget quadruped animations as well. There's basically no limit, and it's quite smart about how it does it. Unreal is particularly good at this. And if you aren't using it, you're wasting time. And what you want to be able to do is make cool things quickly. It's literally 2 buttons. And at the end, I will have links to a bunch of useful FPS animations for you guys to use as well, all for free. So let's talk about sounds. So use some sounds. Sounds do matter. I'm sure a lot of you have had the experience of dropping a sound effect into your game and suddenly going, wow, man, like this suddenly feels like a real game, right? Like you've added some explosions and you go, wow, okay, this is starting to feel like something. So sounds matter, right? But not that much. Like not enough that you should be spending 2 hours searching for the perfect glass or gunshot effect. Use what's useful in terms of prototyping at least. They provide a lot of useful feedback, a lot of useful player feedback, like the alert sound in Metal Gear Solid, crunchy hit sounds versus like a swooshing sword if somebody misses something. But you also shouldn't worry about that stuff if you're making like a puzzle platformer, right? Like an example there is footstep sounds inside of a stealth game are really important because they provide some player feedback about like, oh, I'm sneaking around, I'm making a noise, versus you probably shouldn't waste time putting footsteps into something like a fighting game. Unreal has a really cool trick where if you grab a selection of sounds in the content browser and just right-click them and say create sound queue, it'll automatically create a queue that will randomly play a selection of those sounds whenever you trigger that sound queue. And they help set the tone in your game as well. Cool, so point number 5 is use version control. And this is super, super important, even though it's a little bit irritating to get started with. Google Drive is not version control, guys. Please, do not use Google Drive as version control. Learn some Git. It's not particularly, it's got a little bit of a steep learning curve, but once you've learned it, that's it. Then you know Git, then you're sorted for life. Git lets you undo mistakes per file, go back in time, branch off into somewhere else and for a test and that sort of thing. And you may be thinking like, oh, like I've heard Git is so difficult, but if you use something like SourceTree or GitHub Desktop, both of those are free and easy to use. And there's so many tutorials about how to use them. Seriously, like Google Drive is not version control. You need to stop. Get a GitHub account. And I will have links to tutorials about how to use version control, how to use those bits of software at the end. Cool. So another way to improve your prototyping is make things reusable. Many games share a lot of common elements. An example is health is a very common problem that we have in games. The stealth prototype that I showed earlier uses a single health component for the lights, the glass, the enemies, and the player. There's one reusable health component that I've just thrown onto everything there. And so you should be making things that are reusable. It's generally a good practice anyway. And if you're making something that's generic like a health system, you should be making it well enough that you can drop it into another game immediately anyway. And you should be aiming for, it's good enough. But you also don't want to be wasting a bunch of time. So you need to be spending your time wisely. This is maybe the most important part of the whole talk is don't spend 2 weeks making a water shader. You need to stop. You should use the water shader that I spent 2 weeks making instead. Like your horror game needs some ambience and that sort of thing. But use someone else's water shader. Do not make something just because it may be reusable in the future. You should be making a game, not making things that you think might be useful for a game. And you need to be focusing your time on direct player interaction. So stealth games need to make you feel a bit vulnerable, and have working on stealth games are sort of predicated on the idea that the AI is fairly intelligent, and so you should be working on that instead of spending your time creating the perfect like fire particle effect, for instance. And you need to be constantly asking yourself what actually matters for this game. But everything can be a bit blurry, right? Like you should be aiming for, it's good enough for your prototyping. Which brings us to another point, which is fidelity is not the same as cohesion. Your assets need to just kind of fit together in the same world. That doesn't mean that they need to be high quality. And so here's an example, is that you can use the shotgun on the left, but it takes exactly the same amount of effort to use the shotgun on the right? Like if you go and grab these off a Sketchfab, it's exactly the same process to drop both these into your game and start using them. Just throw them onto some FPS arms and you're good, right? But you also need to manage expectations. So I'm gonna borrow a slide here from a GDC talk by Chris Zimmerman, who is one of the co-founders of Sucker Punch, who made Ghost of Tsushima. What they found when they were busy doing playtesting, and this is the problem that I had with that legally distinct Star Wars game that I made, was that when you start to get a bit of polish in, is that the player's perception of what the game should be tend to skyrocket. And it actually ends up being a frustrating experience for the player. If they perceive that the quality is high enough that their expectations for what the gameplay are should match that, but if you're not quite there, they actually get frustrated about it. And so you need to be able to push through this valley there. So another tool for being able to make prototypes is set deadlines for yourself. Waking up in the morning with something to shoot for can be like an exhilarating experience, right? It's a driving force. So you need to set them to keep you moving, and you can use them as motivation, gamify it, right? Too many weekend game jams will burn you out, so take it easy. But you should be keeping your projects to less than 6 weeks in general. Especially if it's something that, unless you're committed to like, I'm going to make this game, like this is the thing that I'm definitely going to make, you should be spending less than 6 weeks on like prototyping your stuff. So deadlines help you find your current limits as well, is that it helps you find the edge of where your skill set is what can I achieve in this time, what can I actually do with a 6-week block of time. And you need to keep them, you need to keep those deadlines fairly small. You don't want to set a deadline that's 6 months from now. That's not enough, it's not enough pressure for yourself. And another thing is show people once you're done, right? Show people, throw it up on itch, show your friends, family, and colleagues. And if you're scared, too bad. That's what making art is about. And most people will be impressed that you made a game at all. Stay focused. The goal is to actually make a game, right? Like you're not looking to just tinker around on the side, right? You actually want to end up with a finished product at the end of the day that you're able to show people, you're able to play through. And game development is full of rabbit holes, so stop falling down them. A couple of years ago, I spent 2 months just learning and writing a physics engine in 2D from scratch. And 2 weeks into it, I realized, like, oh my goodness, like I could easily spend the next 10 years just doing this. And everything in game dev is like that. Everything in game dev is a 10-year rabbit hole for your career. So you need to stay focused on what your actual current goal is, which is usually make a game, right? You need to stop prototyping at some point and figure out, is this something that I'm actually committed to making? Is this something that I can see like turning into a full product? I unfortunately can't help you with that. So another important point, rest. You can't make cool stuff if you're burnt out. I want you to make cool stuff. You're not a robot. You need to sleep. You cannot hold your life together with stimulants. Stop it. And then finally, you need to credit what you use. Games are never made by one person. Don't fall into the trap of I'll do it myself. I I have been down that road. That's a way to spend 10 years not finishing a game, is I can do everything myself instead of using the skill sets of your friends, the people around you, using assets that you have available that are free to use. There is no shame in teamwork. That's what making games is. It's being part of a team. No game is made in isolation. So keep a list of everyone and everything that you use, and you need to update it regularly. Everybody gets credit. That if you use a small asset for a cup or something, I asked my brother's an architect. I asked him to help me design a level. He gave me sketches on 2 sheets of A4 paper. He gets credit. So let's do a summary. Learn your tools. Use other people's stuff. Learn some Blender. Seriously, Blender rocks, guys. Use Mixamo for rigging. Use animation retargeting. Use some sounds. Use version control. Google Drive is not version control. Make reusable assets. Spend your time wisely. Fidelity is not the same as cohesion. Set deadlines for yourself. Stay focused, rest, and credit what you use. And this talk, including all the slides and my speaker's notes, and all the videos and everything are available at either of these websites. They just both redirect you to a link tree. And the top link there is going to be a presentation, including a list of useful links that are tutorials and assets and whatnot. So go check it out. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Cool.